Right, we'll get going. So please let me know if the audio's any problem with the audio. Hopefully everything's okay. We tested it on our side beforehand, so hopefully you should be hearing me loud and clear. So we'll crack on. So yeah, so thanks for joining us today. We're going to be talking about improving the digital guest experience for Triptease. Myself, I'm Alasdair Snow, so I'm one of the co-founders here at Triptease, and I chiefly head up product. So that's messing around with engineers and product managers and designers and data scientists to kind of build products that serve hoteliers' needs. And I'm also joined by Thomas.
Hello. So I'm a principal product marketing manager, which is a bit of a mouthful. But in essence, it's about making sure that our products sort of connect with our customers in the best way.
Brilliant. We'll crack on. So we're going to break this talk down into three kind of sections. So we're gonna be talking in each part about what are the real challenges guests encounter on the path to purchase. So what are the kinds of problems that we frequently see customers running into when they're trying to book hotels online. We're then going to talk about the business impact and the size of these opportunities. So how much are they affecting your business? And then we're going to talk about how Triptease have started to kind of focus in on these, and we can actually help you make the most out of them and hopefully claw back some of that lost opportunity. So look, booking hotels online, it's a pretty serious business, right? I'm sure we've all felt like this at some point when trying to book a hotel. It can be really, really frustrating. And I think as vendors of like software that customers interact with, we need to be very, very sensitive to those kinds of like small frustrations. There can be even tiny little UX snags on your website. When booking a hotel, those seem to be magnified in terms of the irritation they cause, just because the process of booking a hotel is quite a serious business, right? It's a product that we're going to be spending time with. It's reflective of who we are. It has to serve some pretty important needs when we're moving about and traveling. So there's a lot wrapped up in that purchase, and we need to take it very seriously and be very aware of this stuff. So you can read all about this. We've read our fair share about this. If you Google hotel booking nightmares, you can find hundreds of thousands of quite hilarious and quite terrifying stories from customers who didn't quite get what they were expecting when they made a booking. So it's definitely a known and very substantial problem. And so it's also a key reason why Triptease exists. So when we started the business a couple of years ago, one of the kind of foundational essence behind the business was this recognition that booking hotels online is just a process that's full of an enormous amount of angst and pain and frustration. And it was true a few years ago, and it's often sadly still true today in some areas. But also we were aware that there was a lot of kind of middlemen and kind of commoditization of hotels, and we thought that part of we know that when a hotelier and a guest make a transaction together, it's both parties benefit, and we knew that probably a key to solving some of that online pain was actually bringing customers closer to the end product and the end experience they'd actually be purchasing. So we felt there was some kind of natural tie-in between those two things. And so as a business, this is kind of what our kind of driving agenda and focus and mission is. We want to shift the world to direct, and we aim to do that by effectively improving the guest experience on the direct site. And we've built a kind of suite of tools around that and a real direct booking platform to kind of service some of those more interesting, more unique needs that hotel guests have when booking hotels. So that's a short introduction from myself. Without further ado, I'm going to pass to Thomas, who's going to talk you through a little bit about how we think about the customer journey to booking when booking direct.
Thank you, Alasdair. Okay, so in this section, we're going to talk a bit about the customer activity cycle. And we use the customer activity cycle here at Triptease to try and understand some of the thinking and some of the behaviors that guests go through when they're researching and considering a stay. The reason we do that is that we want to understand the context of our clients' websites in what is an otherwise longer journey. And if we can understand the underlying need that a guest is exhibiting, and we can serve that need better, then they're much more likely to stay with us, and they're much more likely to book. So someone that I want to bring into the room here is Clay Christensen. Obviously, we couldn't get him, but we'll hold the quote, which is a fantastic way for kind of focusing our thinking, and that is that people don't want to buy a 1/4-inch drill, they want a 1/4-inch hole. And really this is important for understanding that there are needs that drive behaviours. So we're going to observe some behaviours and try and understand the needs that underlie them. So these are the 6 phases that we'll go through today. We will see how that by satisfying the needs in these different stages, you move someone through the conversion funnel, and then you get them to fall in love with your hotel and click the conversion button. So this first area is out of market. So this is before anyone even has any need for a hotel. We're constantly processing information. And the reason for that is actually a bit of a coping mechanism, so that your brain is always filtering information out, and the important stuff it takes and it puts into a kind of scenario in the brain that psychologists refer to as schemas. And that's quite good. If you happen to be a very large brand, people will kind of remember things about your brand just from their day-to-day. And a good way that that's exploited in hospitality is to do destination marketing. So there are constantly different scenarios in our head that we hold about what the perfect holiday is, and different kind of destinations try and fulfill that role. But it can also be abused. So one of the things that we're acutely aware of here is that OTAs have spent a lot of money in marketing to land the idea with guests that cheaper prices are available with OTAs. We know that's not true. So actually, in this scenario, we have to start from the back foot a little bit. Moving into phase 2, we know that we rarely know exactly what we need from a hotel when we start our search. And I say that to put into context the complexity of some of the decision making that we're going to see as we go through. Importantly, 35% of shoppers start with 2 destinations in mind. So a lot of us as hoteliers sort of sometimes think someone knows exactly what they want and I need to kind of make sure that I'm there front of mind at that moment. Well, actually, we know that some of these needs that guests are trying to satisfy may be completely outside of destination. So for example, I might look for best holidays to have with kids, or I might have a passion that I'm following. That could be inspiring me to book. But something that is really quite fascinating and almost unique in the way that we search for hotels is that we have 140 visits over a 45-day purchase kind of window. Now that is an awful lot of opportunity. Because it's so complex, we break up the research into lots of little bite-sized chunks, which gives us some great opportunities for engaging them and dealing with those needs. Now, as I said, finding the perfect hotel is really, really complex. We were just talking about even narrowing down a destination can be hard, but when it comes down to the hotel, not only does it serve a base need of kind of somewhere to sleep, somewhere to relax, but also there are many other needs that are linked off of this. And so you really have a desire to try and find the right one, especially when you know that there are thousands of options out there. So yeah, we talked a lot about cost of failure as being quite high, because if you have a really bad hotel, that could ruin your vacation or your business trip. But also, because of this complexity, you have to rely a lot on this system 2 thinking, or what I'll refer to as rational decision making. And that's because there are lots of different criteria that you are building up through your research process that affect what the perfect hotel is going to be. As you learn, that criteria gets stronger. So what we try and do early doors is learn as much information as we can about the place we're visiting. And we do that by using the schemas that we talked about before, but also dependable personal networks and tribes. And what I mean by that is go and ask your friends. We'll go to Instagram. We might follow someone that we really trust. It might be a celebrity that we've seen something. And it's because we're trying to get information in and decrease the labor on our decision making. Ultimately, you get to this point where you have a machine that's going to help you calibrate and shortlist the best hotels for you. And it's made up of kind of 4 elements, really. And that is location, budget, the itinerary, and the kind of quality of experience that you're expecting to get. And throughout this stage of the customer activity cycle, we're kind of swapping out different things. Sometimes the location might not be as good, but I can save a bit of money, or maybe I really want a kind of traditional experience, but that's not going to quite get me the itinerary that I want. So we're playing trade-offs at all times, and because this is quite complicated, we then enlist the help of the dreaded OTAs, because we want to see thousands of options, because we know they're out there and we know that we've got very strict criteria, so we go to them to help us. And that's why you'll see the tools on an OTA website are very much based around, here's the location, set your budgets, work out exactly where you need to be. This is like where the center of the city is often. This is where you'll find the hotel. And then there's all these other things about star ratings, guest reviews. They're all in there to help you try and go through this process. And, you know, let's be honest, the OTAs are doing a bloody good job of it. And that is why they're taking so much of this online booking market. 2 in every 3 online bookings now are being made through OTAs, but there's hope. So effectively, when we're going through this process, we're refining what we expect out of the best hotel, and then we get to a final few. We're discounting as many hotels as we can, and then when we have between kind of 2 and 5, I like to think of 3 because it's easier, but we have kind of 3 options on the table that we're going to consider, and 2 of those options are going to be the hotels that you're always coming up against, right? They're the people that you go to their website in the morning, you look at what offers they're running, you know who they are, they're in the same streets, and those are your competition day in, day out. There's going to be another person, another competitor of yours, maybe a bit of a wild card. So in the example here, I've got, actually I put an Airbnb option right at the bottom of the screen there, because it shows that actually you're no longer just competing with other hotels, right? You could now equally be competing with someone who's rented out their luxury yacht, as you could with you know, the next competitor. So moving on, yeah, so some interesting things here. When someone is visiting this kind of first date stage, so we've gone through the selection criteria, you've been found out of thousands, and now I'm coming to visit you. I'm not going to come in through the front door. I'm going to come right in at the deep pages of your website, because I know what I need. You've already shown me that you're the right sort of hotel. Any one of these options could be chosen at this point. Right now, we're starting to move away from rational decision making into falling in love. So allowing that system 1 thinking to really start to take over. The reason why system 1 thinking is so good is because it allows our instinct to pick up on all the nuances that we hadn't otherwise got time or can articulate ourselves when we're making that kind of criteria up. So here, some important notes to make. Firstly is that when you brought someone all the way through this rational decision making, they've come, they're falling in love with your hotel, the last thing you want to do is to kick them back all the way to a kind of rational decision making again, because you might not make the short list, sorry, this time round. So if you've got bad news, get rid of it early on. So here's some examples of the sorts of things that would be detractors for someone at this stage. But yeah, it's important now to be personally relevant. We said before that there are lots of visits taking place. That's lots of data that someone is kind of pouring into this. And if you're able to reflect that back at them, any kind of way that you can show them that this individual is personally relevant to you and you can change the experience for them, you're going to win every time, because it's just about showing them that you care about their business. And experiences are a brilliant way of getting emotional stimulation, because at this point, you could be the one that they go away with, but it's just about, can I get ahead of those 2, 3 other competitors that are on the table at this time? So that was a kind of whistle-stop tour of the customer activity cycle. You could have 1,000 different points that we could talk about here. I just wanted to give a flavor of the sort of changing needs and the changing sort of thoughts that are going through the minds of customers. And obviously, right now, when we're talking about the experiences you can deliver on your website, we are going to be focused more towards the latter. But I still think it's really interesting to understand like the journey that people come on before they reach your site. So as we go on, we're going to kind of talk about the things that we could be doing as hoteliers on the website straight away that speak to the needs of customers that have come through this journey. First thing, once shortlisted, don't force back into the consideration stages. So as we were saying, if you have been selected in that way, air your dirty laundry. Don't give them any kind of excuse to have to go back and do all of that research again. The second point here is to center in on the experiences for guests on their particular needs and particular situations. Essentially, how can you personalize it? How can you make it relevant to that individual? And then lastly, you need to be able to demonstrate a bit of your hospitality, right? That's what's going to set you apart from your other competitors, is your flavor of hospitality. And really, coming to the website needs to be the first demonstration of that. Right, so that's me. I'm going to hand over to Alasdair now. He's going to take on another section and sort of look at this kind of consideration stage.
Yeah, so don't let guests fall out of love with you because you're being undercut. One way to absolutely ruin a first date, the kind of digital first date Thomas talked about, is if there's actually a cheaper price elsewhere. It's the customer might still fall in love with you, but they might book on that other channel, or they might just take another option from their consideration set. So it's a really important theme, and it's one that I think we want to start with because it's kind of an early factor in terms of how customers might consider where they might book. So your customer will find the cheapest price. It's pretty scary. So these days, people are inherently comparative when they approach shopping. They're very well trained in terms of where they need to go to make sure that they're not being ripped off. And it's something that I think hoteliers need to take super seriously. It's not, when you're being undercut, you're not being sneaky. It's not something the customer won't discover. They will discover it, and they will make a purchasing decision based on that. And we can see that played out in all our data. So parity matters, right? So don't believe me. We look at our data and we can see that a quarter of the time hotels are actually being undercut by online travel agents. And it's a huge problem. So that's 1 in 4 searches, the customer would have been able to get a cheaper price elsewhere. We can see that's having a demonstrable effect on conversion rate. But the interesting stat, and maybe this is a slightly jokey stat, but is that when we talk to customers, it seems like 100% of the time the hotels aren't actually aware of the problem that they actually face, or they can't perceive it. And there's some interesting kind of reasons why that is. The first reason is that we see undercut rates varying massively by geography. So this is looking across Europe, and so you can see there's much higher disparity in places like Germany, Sweden, Turkey, Bulgaria, but better parity in places like Spain, Italy, Ireland. So from your single hotel, it's quite difficult to actually get this complete picture. But we also know that it varies based on device and other factors. So it's very difficult to kind of get a full grasp on the scope of the problem. But yes, in terms of the impact on the bottom line, it's huge, and it's almost like we recommend people solving this as a kind of precondition to doing anything else. So if you look on the left here, this is customers who are being undercut 30 to 40% of the time, which is not unusual, and they're converting at 36% less than customers who are being undercut 0 to 10% of the time. So that is a massive impact in terms of conversion rate on the direct site. So it's a big opportunity to go after. We can also see this opportunity reflected in the number of OTAs that are undercutting you. So this chart shows that where you have no one undercutting you versus having 4 people undercutting you at the same time for any given search, the conversion rate also sees a similar kind of decline. And one of the pieces of advice we give to hotels we're working with is one of the ways of managing the problems of parity and managing the problems of OTA is actually just reducing the number of OTAs you work with. It makes it much more easy and manageable from a rates and inventory point of view, but it also it reduces your exposure to these kinds of problems that can be kind of having a multiplier effect on conversion rate. So what are you guys doing about it? So we often like to talk to hotels about how they manage this problem. So as I mentioned, like a lot of customers just aren't aware of the amount of disparity, their current disparity rate. Some people have people who are manually kind of checking this stuff on a daily basis, perhaps logging in to make sure Expedia aren't running off any offers, or they correctly propagated their rates through the system. So it's worth doing a bit of a kind of a personal audit on like how you consider your approach to disparity and how important it is to the business and what steps you're currently doing. Because when we compare it to the OTAs, it's a huge problem for them. Like when we look at the way the OTAs approach this problem, they're tracking it like crazy, right? So we see this in our data in lots of different ways. One is we see enormous amounts of bot traffic to hotel sites, and we're constantly looking at that and actually blocking some of that stuff. And we believe a lot of that is third parties monitoring your prices. A lot of that probably is the OTAs. We also know that we also see this reflected in the fact that when some of our hotels, they might run our offer direct, they'll very quickly be getting automated emails from the OTAs about this and asking them to remove it and pushing that kind of stuff. So we know that they take it super seriously. It's an incredibly important frontier when it comes to managing guest relationships online. So how can Triptease help? So something that we launched way back is the disparity dungeons. This is where we kind of lock up examples of disparities for the hoteliers to go and fix. So unlike kind of other kind of products out there, we've taken a slightly different approach. So rather than doing like a clean sweep of prices over the next 60, 90 days, we actually react in real time to the searches that are happening on your site. So that has a couple of advantages. So one, it allows us to actually make the parity management problem much more customer driven. So we aren't actually asking you to spend time fixing disparities for searches that aren't of high importance. So because we understand the profile of your guests and the kinds of dates they're interested in, we can actually direct your attention to the disparities that are having the biggest impact on guest behavior and guest bookings. So we can see all kinds of things here around sorting by frequency, and we also have some base logic underneath this stuff, changing the sorting logic. So we also have, we provide lots more information around each disparity. So we around the search terms, guest details, browser location, that kind of stuff. But we also provide rich screenshots so that you have a piece of evidence you can actually take to the offending party and ask them to fix that if it's a problem on their side. So you can be sure that these are replicable and they actually definitely happened. Obviously, there's also loads of reporting around this. We understand, to help you target your activities, so we can see undercut rates by breakdown. We can look across property. We can see how that mirrors in terms of conversion impact and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, the other advantage I say of being customer driven is because all of this parity checking is in total real time. The second the customer is running that search, we're actually in the position of actually reflecting that data straight back to the customer themselves and prove that the rate is best. So because we take the effort to actually replicate the search of a customer in Miami on their mobile phone and understand whether if they were to flip over to booking.com in that very moment, what would they see? We actually have the confidence and the credibility to actually present that data back to the customer on the hotel site and say, hey, look, we've actually got a better price. You should come stay here today. We can also then react in real time if the customer doesn't. So that's kind of our approach to parity and how we think we can help stop customers falling out of love with you and ruining that first date as a result of being undercut. I think the other in terms of Thomas's intro, the other I think the impact of disparity that we often ask customers to reflect on is that moment when you're being undercut, right? Like, as we're in the industry, like our default reaction now is like, oh, poor hotel, they're being undercut. Like, this is frustrating. But we've always got to keep in mind the customer's perception, which is like, here we have another hotel trying to be sneaky, trying to rip me off, and it strengthens that outer market perception Thomas talked about, that the OTAs have a complete set of unbiased options and they offer me the best price. And so you've got to also be thinking not in terms of just like your own conversion impact, but also those wider outer market perceptions that the whole industry is vulnerable to. Cool.
Okay, so as we were saying, if you cast your mind back to the customer activity parts, when we move away from rational into emotional, we like it when people speak our language. We like it when people change the experience and be hospitable towards us, really. So let's take a look at how we can start to act upon this and why we ought to. So the first thing is 3 great examples of enormous companies that are doing exceptionally well, all of which are outstripping their competition, all of which are doing very well in their respective financial markets. And the reason I believe that's happening is because they have moved personalisation to the core of their business. And essentially, the way that they make money is based on their ability to understand individuals and then give them a better experience because of that. So Another way of pushing that is that true personalisation learns from collective activity and then enhances the individual experience. So essentially, every time someone interacts with a business like that, they understand from it, they learn from it, they make it better for the next person who follows through. A great example here from Netflix was the House of Cards franchise. Did exceptionally well, well known for being crowdsourced, so they looked at what people wanted and then decided where to invest. But in fact, this picture you're seeing is an example of where they've taken that and then they've flipped it on its head. So they've now done hyper-personalized, targeted advertising based on who you are, what your preferences are, even though they learned from the collective to build it in the first place. So that's really great stuff. It's not just for the likes of kind of content creators or massive technology companies. The average customer engages in 40,000 digital micro moments on their way to making a purchase. So I said before about this 45-day window with a load of site visits. Well, this is like all of the different digital touch points, the different moments that you could have learned about someone on their way to purchase. And it really works, right? It's proven to be effective. You can see here that 83% of customers are actually expecting the experience to be changed, and 53% have increased their average order, and 33% of conversion rate increase, which is fantastic. So, you know, who else is doing this in hospitality? Well, here's a nice quote from Expedia. They know that the power of personalization is so strong that if you, as a hotelier, are unable to provide them with the content they need, the meta information that they need to personalize it for their guests, they're going to downrank you, which you don't want. But there have been challenges in hospitality, particularly with data, particularly with actioning that data, purely because, I mean, this might be relevant to some of you on the line today. If you have a booking engine that is separate to your marketing website, if you are unable to track information as users move between those two, if you're using a third party to help you with putting content onto your website, these are all indicators that you're going to struggle to make the best use out of the data, right? We call that data siloing, and it's difficult to achieve personalization in hospitality as a result. And actually, there's a massive opportunity because we know that being dynamic and targeting content for individuals can help you do some really clever stuff around targeting guests, but making sure that you give them just enough to convert without having to like really take a hit on margin. So you can be really smart about it, super targeted, and really drive towards a revenue management agenda. And one of the things we've been super passionate about is saying to people that it's about the rate of learning, right? And why we talk about the rate of learning is because every hotel is different, every hotel website is different, and every customer who visits it is different. You need to understand about your hotel, and to do that, you need to understand data at large, which individual hotels may not have access to. That's why we bring this community of hotels together to understand more about what makes people want to buy. You need to then be able to identify a person when they come to your site. You need to be able to match them up with a piece of content to help them convert. And it's only how you go through this system of learning that you start to really progress forward. So here's an example of where we're starting to use data to help with decision making. We're looking at how different audiences convert at different levels or are prepared to pay a certain level, and you can start to change the messaging for those different audiences. You wouldn't want to give a discount message to someone who is clearly and generally a very large spender. You're probably more benefit in giving them a kind of upgrade message. The same here, you can actually look at different periods, right? So say there's a period of occupancy, low occupancy that you want to focus on, or you know that actually for a particular event that's coming up in your local calendar that you want to get in there really quickly and try and get like a critical mass of rooms sold for that period. You can do all of these things. You can start to look at how far out someone is in their booking window. And this is actually much more aligned to how you're going to look at your revenue at the end of the quarter, how you're going to reconcile the activities that you've taken place on this site. It helps you move towards a business agenda. And obviously, the combinations of these different like kind of tools and techniques, I haven't gone into too much detail today, that's probably for another time, but you can get thousands of options. The reason that we think you need thousands of options is because ultimately guests are very different. They all have different needs. Even if the same person comes through your site, they've got lots of different needs at different times. And importantly, as I kind of mentioned earlier, we have tried to give people the best environment for learning, for creating, and for refining, because that's the way that you hoteliers are going to kind of take the battle to online travel agents, is by taking control of your own data and really understanding what's going on your website. And I think that's it for personalisation. I'm not sure because I can't see what they said. Oh yeah, here's some success we've had with doing this with our clients. So it's nice to have some facts to back up what you're saying, isn't it? So yeah, I mean, if we just cast our eyes on the last one there on the far right, there's a 37% increase in conversion over a period of about 3. What were we talking about there? All right, maybe a bit longer. Obviously, there's a different chart to what I had before. Yeah. But yeah, so in not much time, you can really affect a massive amount of change.
Yeah. Look after your guests online and demonstrate the quality of your service. So coming back again to the kind of the customer activity cycle Thomas talked about. So one of the things that you talked about was kind of system one thinking, like tapping into more of the emotional reasons why someone might make a purchase. And we think one of the big ones is around that sense of like, am I going to get looked after at this place? Like, to what degree does the online experience kind of in subtle ways reflect the quality of the experience I get at the hotel itself? And we think this is one of the big kind of emotional triggers that can lead to a direct purchase. And we see this in many ways on the hotel site, which is really exciting. Yes, so look, there's a growing customer service gap online, right? For years, the onus has fallen on the customer to go and find the information they require to make a purchasing decision online, right? I might have to drill, do some data mining to find out whether I can bring my dog to your hotel or whatever it is, right? It's like I have to go through various subsections of the website and drill down and try and find that information. Or I can take the reasonably onerous option of actually stopping what I'm doing, picking up the phone, finding your phone number, entering your phone number, ringing you up, or doing the same via email. And I think these days the expectation from customers is that they should be able to get real-time answers from brands pretty quickly through comfortable, convenient form of messaging. So we're seeing this gap now growing online. I think it's hugely important. So messaging, as I say, is growing massively. This is some data from a couple of years ago that just shows it's surpassed social networking in terms of prominence, and it continues to accelerate. This is another chart that's more recent that just shows just how exponential that growth has been over the last few years. So WhatsApp, WeChat, Facebook Messenger, these things are just taking off, and people creating small little social communities inside there. And we can also see this on a generational basis, right? So silent generation, born before 1944, so quite a bit. Yeah,
74.
Yeah, maybe 74. So they probably have a preference still for phone, but we're seeing Gen X, Gen Y, much higher preference for web chat online or social media when it comes to in getting the information they need from brands. But the interesting thing is since we've launched Front Desk, the product I'm going to talk about, we've seen this play out in our data, right? So where we're offering this kind of assistance to customers, we're seeing 1 in 10 people require that before making a booking direct. And I think with that kind of data, it's kind of just indicative of the fact that this really is now an essential piece of kind of your conversion architecture on the site. You just need this. The other thing, obviously, is we see that if you help these people, they're converting 30% higher than they otherwise would have. So these people are already engaged, right? If they're getting to the point where they're asking those subtle questions around what time does the pool open in the morning, or is breakfast included, or how close is parking to the hotel? If they want to answer those questions, then you've got to think that you're pretty far down into that consideration set, and you're you're a hot choice. You're on that shortlist, right? And so you just need to very quickly get them the answer they need to kind of tip them over the edge and help them make a booking. So as with parity, I guess the good thing to do is to do a bit of an audit around it, right? So play out as if you were a customer on your website, right? Right now, if I was on your site and I had a question okay, is parking near the hotel? How quickly could I find that information? Well, try it on your phone. Open your mobile phone and open your site and go, okay, could I quickly find out whether I could bring my pet to this hotel, right? And just do a kind of an audit around that and see whether you as a customer or you're right to expect your customers to maybe fall back on the channels that you currently have. Do you have a form they fill out? Do you display your phone number prominently, email? It's good to constantly ask you a question, because this is a really important thing. The other thing I think is contrary to kind of parity, where that's something that I think you really need to do to go toe to toe with the OTAs, and they obviously care massively about it. I think when it comes to live chat, this is something they care about, but hotels have a massive advantage. So when we talk about when we look at the way the kinds of steps OTAs are beginning to take, they're beginning to bring messaging into their product. Most of this is currently post-purchase. So Booking.com have added they've added post-purchase messaging. So some hotels are now being encouraged to actually answer the questions to customers before coming to stay through the Booking.com platform. They've also got some automation around that. And you can I just feel like it's only a matter of time until they bring that experience pre-purchase and potentially start to change maybe ranking rules or commission rates around whether the hoteliers will actually service customers with any questions before making a booking. But I think there's that's brewing. But then when I say hotels have an advantage, you guys just know so much about the product, so much more about the product, right? Like, you know all those kinds of nitty-gritty questions around the service experience guests can expect when they come to stay. So look, we know that well-trained humans are great. Like, as a business, we just knew from the get-go that nothing could replicate the kinds of levels of like empathy and care and service that a well-trained human agent looking after a customer can provide. So we've built our front desk product very much with that in mind, and we also built it very much with the hotel team in mind. So this is a kind of a collaborative inbox where customers, so the hoteliers can kind of corral around a guest and serve their needs. So we have on the left like messages coming in from guests. On the right, we have all the kinds of information you might require to get the full context of this guest. So how many times have they visited? What's their journey look like so far? What hotels have they looked at? What dates are they interested in? What pricing information have been shown? Even like what price comparison they've seen, right? Like, so it's very important. We also got more information on the guest. Are they high value, leisure? Are they a first time visitor? And we also have tooling to allow you to serve those guests' needs in interesting ways. So, answering frequently asked questions with templated responses, taking credit card information and actually processing bookings as well. So we've set this tool up specifically to make it really, really easy for humans to service those guests. But the other thing we've invested massively in is automation. So there's a real reason for that, and it kind of allows us to bring everyone along. So one of the things, there's a real mismatch between customers' expectations, which they want like instant responses, they want it available 24/7, and a hotel's ability to actually deliver on that and kind of cater to that need. Like, you might be able to write wonderful answers to guests, but if it's arriving a couple of hours late, and when I just wanted a quick answer before making a booking decision, it's just too late, right? So we built this tool to get the facts to the customer as quickly as possible to the questions that frequently kind of crop up on that path to purchase. And using automation, we can now automate up to 80% of the kinds of messages that are coming in on the hotel site. So it's a dramatic reduction in the amount of staffing resource the hotels using our product have to put against this product, which is great. And the really great thing is from a conversion perspective, this really works. So, what we call it auto agent, like an automated agent. And it currently is one of the best performing agents in our system because of its ability to answer questions super fast, super rapidly, super consistently, which is great. So that's front desk. It's automated live assistance. It's comfortable and convenient for your guests. It's right there on site. They can get the assistance they need before making a booking. It helps with conversion rate, and the automation frees up resource requirements and ensures the agents are only focusing on those more complex inquiries where they really need to get involved. So that is front desk, and kind of really what that's driving towards is kind of something we talk about a lot here at Triptease, which is this idea of bringing hospitality online, right? Like that, that sense of we want the digital experience to reflect the experience that the customer can expect walking into your property. And I think, when we looked at that customer activity cycle, those subtle, like almost indiscernible kind of features of a hotel website that kind of bring that sense of hospitality to light. And we think a big one of those is the level of care and attention you'll give to customers, and how prominently you'll display your willingness to help them online. And we see that thing having a big impact on not only short-term conversion rate, but I think also out-of-market perceptions on where the best place to book is moving forward. So that's the meat of what we wanted to talk about today. Kind of like 3 big areas. I think, fixing your parity, making sure people are falling out of love with you for that, changing your experience to better service the guest needs that are arriving, and using that to drive a revenue agenda. But then lastly, also bringing hospitality online, helping guests fall in love with the quality of your service, and booking direct. So that's kind of it from us on the main meat of the presentation. Thomas and I are very, very happy to answer any questions at greater length in emails. I think that's going to be shared afterwards. Yeah, we can share our email addresses, so you're very happy and very welcome to send us any emails with any follow-up questions you have. Also very happy to jump on the phone if you've got any ideas or want to chat about products and kind of your own experiences. We absolutely love chatting to customers. It's massively important, valuable and central part of everything we do. So I hope that's been interesting and some food for thought, and I hope, maybe speak to some of you guys soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, all right. Thank you so much.